Hey everybody, hope you had a great time today. Once again, I'm Connor O'Malley. So check it out, we've got our closing keynote, Marshall Behringer, and he's from Filament Games, but in addition to that, he's a licensed educator with ELA, and so he's had experience with education as well as he's moved over to the community outreach specialist at Filament Games. So he's very much about working with teachers and working with the community to implement these fantastic games. So, Marshall?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah. Cool. So first of all, it's a little weird to hear myself on a speaker system. I have classroom experience. I've taught in classrooms, but very rarely did I ever have to use a mic for anything. So forgive the change of pace in that. My name is Marshall. I work for Filament Games, which is an educational video game studio located in Madison, Wisconsin. Our focus is primarily developing and publishing middle school science games that are aligned to NGSS. We've developed games for life science, we've developed games for physical science, and we've developed games for earth science. We're also working on a project that we're calling right now Discussion Maker. That's not what it's going to be called down the road because it's a terrible name, but it's called Discussion Maker, and the whole goal is to help scaffold students. Again, lower middle school is kind of the target range. Scaffold them into having collegiate, evidence-based discussions about any sort of topic that a teacher wants those students to talk about. So they create their own custom content, they enter it into the tool, they put it into a unit somewhere, and then the students, using the tool, are able to have conversations with each other. We envision this on iPads. So instead of staring at the iPad, they're talking with each other. The iPad is just helping them do that in a way that isn't just shouting past each other, which, if anybody pays attention to Congress, they could probably use it too. Today, I'm talking about kind of what I do at Filament, which is to bridge the gap between developers and educators, right? We develop games for classroom use. That is our purpose. That is our mission, is to develop games for classroom use. The end user in that case is the teacher. And without the teacher involved in that process, what we make isn't going to work, right? And that's my job. My job is to bridge that gap. Okay? I just got back from New York City. We had Games for Change Festival all this week, so I'm dealing with a little jet lag, so you'll have to kind of forgive me if I pass out on the floor. First off, building together is the focus of all of our work. All too often you have tools developed for classrooms that are developed from the top down. You have developers, editors, writers, people who've never stepped foot in a classroom outside of their own K-12 and college experience, creating things that we swear to God will work for you. They will work perfectly for you, and we guarantee that sort of. And it's passed to you by whoever made the purchase decision in the district, and then you have to find out how to use it, whether or not it's a good tool. This has happened a lot, and it frustrated me when I was teaching too, because I felt like I was being told how to do my job by people who have no idea. Filament's focus is different. We're all about collaborating. Okay? We're all about working with teachers to build things that teachers can use. Okay? So what I'm going to talk about today is my background, where I come from. We're going to think a little bit about what this gap means. We're going to talk about the concept of intersections, and we're going to talk about some Filament's ideal model, and things that I've learned in my position in this space. And along the way, so the PowerPoint is mostly to keep me from meandering, because I like to do that. But along the way, we'll be guided by a couple of questions that I don't necessarily know the answer to. And I hope to be done with enough time at the end that we can actually talk about this stuff. I want to get your perspectives. I want to hear your concerns, because I have concerns too about education technology and where education is going. And since you're the up and coming, it's really important for you to have a voice and to engage in this conversation as well. So first of all, what do developers and educators have in common? And developers, I'm talking specifically in this case about developers of technology tools meant for classroom use. This is anything digital. These are games, these are tools, these are the smart boards, right? Anything that gets developed and is intended to be a digital tool for the classroom. What do those developers have in common with educators? And then kind of the subtext of this is, how do we reclaim education? So, who am I? My name is Marshall. I am the Community Development and Outreach Specialist at Filament Games. I am a certified secondary English language arts teacher. I went to UW-Madison, graduated in 2012. Okay, so it hasn't been long since I graduated. I have some teaching experience in middle school as well as high school. I taught the full gamut, 6th, 7th, 8th, and then 9th grade remedial English as well as 12th grade AP rhetoric. Okay? There are a number of frustrations that I faced. I graduated into Walker and everything that was happening around that time. I left school amid that climate. For me, that was a number of challenges that when I went into education, I didn't anticipate facing. Feeling disrespected from every corner. Okay? And I made the decision early on that, I've got my whole life ahead of me. I'm young and naive. I don't know anything yet. What right do I have to educate kids when I don't know things? And second of all, do I really want to put up with this right now? And after a little while in the field, I decided that the answer was no. Okay, that's why I'm here right now, as opposed to in a classroom. I'm also a gamer. Okay? I play a lot of video games. I always have. I grew up with a Super Nintendo. Now I play, PlayStation 4. I've kept up, and it's a huge part of my life. How many of you consider yourselves gamers at all? Okay. How many of you play, games like it's a full-time job? Okay, me too, I do too. During the summer, okay, that's fair. I do always, and it gets in the way sometimes. How many of you are casual gamers? Okay. So most of you play games, whether casually or hardcore. I would argue that there's not too much of a difference because a gamer is a gamer is a gamer. You all have the same sort of interests. It's just the amount of time that you're willing to invest. Okay. I'm a gamer. I am a teacher. And I work at Filament Games as the teacher liaison. I bridge that gap. And I'm passionate about supporting educators in their work. I'm not on the front lines, but I do damn near everything that I can to support those who are. And that's why I'm in the position that I'm in. Okay? So, I was in New York this week at Games for Change. The first day, on Tuesday, of the festival, the U.S. Department of Education hosted a Learning Games Summit for developers and educators who are innovating in the field to come together and figure this all out. What are we doing with games and learning? Okay? And this is the first one that they've ever done. It was awesome. It was stressful. It was busy. I want them to move it to Madison and have it go over several days because there are a lot of sessions that I wanted to go to. I couldn't. And New York is really expensive. The people in this photo, there's obviously me on the left. Then going to the right is Christine, Michelle, and Tammy. Those are 3 science teachers who have worked with us as part of the Research Experiences for Teachers Teacher Fellow program, funded by the NSF. During the summer, they for the past 2 years, this represents 2 cohorts. The past 2 years, the past 2 summers, they journey from wherever, they apply, they get accepted, they journey to Madison to work with us in our studio for 6 weeks. They have their own research questions about games, about the use of games in learning, and we have teachers to work with. Okay? 6 weeks is not a lot of time. My job is to make sure that they feel invested, to make sure that they get integrated into our culture right away so that we can work wonderfully together. So that by the end of 6 weeks, when they've finally gotten used to each other, that isn't the first point at which anybody talks to each other, okay, profitably. Instead, right away, right from the get-go, we work together. We still work together, okay? These three women who are standing next to me, they are constantly working with me. They are constantly giving feedback, giving input, testing things out with their classrooms. And they're awesome. They're awesome, awesome, awesome. Christine now works for a museum in New York as part of an educational program, and Tammy actually works as a science coordinator out in Washington. She advises 48 districts on adoption of NGSS. Okay? And Michelle is still a classroom teacher. So we have kind of the gamut of people that we work with. And these are just the people that we work with very regularly. Part of my job is to also do a lot of outreach locally in Madison to make sure that we're not just working with the same 3 people all the time. And so we've got a huge community of people that we work with constantly. And at the bottom, kneeling, is Carrie. She works in much the same role as I do, but for iCivics. Have any of you heard of iCivics.org? Okay, a couple of you. Who's going to be teaching social studies in some capacity? Anybody? No? Okay. You kind of. Well, anybody who knows a social studies teacher to be, iCivics is a nonprofit that was founded by Sandra Day O'Connor to reinvigorate civics education for middle school. All of the games are free. They come with lesson plans. Collectively, they've been played 40 million times. Okay? They are in every state. Teachers in every state use them. And they're awesome. Okay? It's everything civics related. I think they have, 25 games now, Beth? They have a lot. We'll just leave it there. They have a lot. Okay. Yeah. So social studies, if you know anybody who's looking for resources, iCivics.org is a great place to go. So the first question is, what do developers and educators have in common? Okay, and I want you to guide your thinking as we talk, okay? Because that's a question that there's not a lot of answers to right now. My job is to try to figure that out. My job is to bridge the gap. But it's still an open question. The second question is, why do so many kids succumb in frustration to homework but persist in the face of impossible digital challenges? Okay. Why do kids hate math homework, but they will try, fail at Mario? Okay. The quote at the bottom is Latin for, I will either find a way or make one. Okay. That's typical, right? I mean, I don't think anybody in here wants to give worksheets for the rest of their profession. Who wants to? Nobody wants to. Nobody wants that. A lot of professionals are bound by district requirements or state requirements or curriculum that have been developed and put on them, right? In a lot of cases, that leads to that. That's not engaged. That child is forcing through not because they want to, but because it is the forced march through education. In a lot of my literacy classes, you had a required book list. Didn't matter who the kid was. Didn't matter what their interests were. Didn't matter what their level of development was. To hell with the kid. We've got these books that they need to read. Okay? That's the forced march through education. If education is going to serve any purpose at all, it has to serve the kids who are being educated, right? And I think you'd all agree, right? Nobody disagrees with that. But conditions right now are such that that is what we're getting. That is what we're getting. Okay? Now, I want you to contrast with this. Who's heard of the game series, or the game Dark Souls? Okay? Does anybody want to explain why Dark Souls is such a phenomena in video games? Go for it.
Well, it's this really, really difficult game, and you die a lot, but, like, once you finally get past this boss fight, you feel like so good after you beat it that you just keep on going. You like die all the time.
Yeah. So try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, right? I'll admit it, I love Dark Souls. This boss fight that we're going to watch right now is Ornstein and Smaug. It is the worst boss fight in any game ever because you're fighting these two jerks at the same time, and they're terrible, okay? We're going to watch one player batting their head against the wall, trying to beat this boss, and I want you to pay attention to the frustration, okay? Just, that's all I need you to focus on.
Someone keep count. Oh, this fight is No! No! Good start. Oh, this fight is so difficult. Alright, we're going well, we're going well. The secret to this boss fight is to not panic. Ah! Okay. That's you can't do that. This is a good attempt. Just wait till you see a bad one. My hands are sweaty already. Oh, come on! Stop trying to hit me and hit me! Oh, that should be collateral. No! Get behind the pillar. Oh, I hate that triple roll thing he does. It's unfair. It's cheap. That's. I'm still alive. Heal, heal. Roll. Oh, get up. Get up. No. Cheap. That's cheap. Oh, that was the first go. Oh, it was coming. It was actually going well. Oh, I'm not even there. Get going.
Okay. So, you died. That screen, you see it way too much while you're playing this game. The latest game in the series, Bloodborne, came out. The very first boss, I probably died 50 or 60 times before I beat him. Okay? It was not pretty. Now, that was difficult, right? You take that and you put it against, oh Lord, okay. You take that and, what did I do here? Okay, cool. So you take that, you put it against math homework, right? Math homework isn't some guy driving at you with a lance. It's a series of equations on a piece of paper. But why is that the face of a learner learning math or doing math homework? But in the very next thing, we have somebody batting their heads against a wall, and it is obviously frustrating. It is obviously difficult. The person is getting frustrated. They're swearing. They're screaming at the game. But that video goes on for 12 minutes of him trying. Okay? And to take it a step further, we're going to just look at this for a second. To take it a step further, sorry, Beth. To take it a step further, you have this next video. This guy is playing it with a Guitar Hero guitar. He made it more difficult for himself because he wanted to. You can see him in the corner. This is the hardest boss in the game, one of the hardest bosses in any game ever.
Wow! Awesome. I love getting through that fog. And that was just terrible.
For those of you who are interested, this guy also does this fight using rock band drums. That's interesting. He also does it using a bongo. Okay? There are people who go through this game without... So how many of you are familiar in RPGs, you have the concept of leveling up? Okay, you beat enemies, you beat bosses, you gain experience points, you level up. There are people who go through this game without leveling up, ever. Okay? It is difficult, but it is fair. It's difficult, but it's fair. It will run you through the mud but you will learn it. And you will learn to like that pain, as in this case, but you will eventually defeat everything that stands before you. Okay? Why is that? Why is that? Why, on the one hand, with traditional schooling, do we have this? Where you hit the wall and that's it. You're done. You have kids checking out. But then they go home and play that. Okay? And that's another question that I, as somebody who works in an educational game studio, I wrestle with. Everybody in this space wrestles with it. Because, I mean, that's the question we have to answer. Okay? And we can talk about that later. So, we have that struggle of school, which is typically boring, right? That's what everybody thinks of when they think of school, is it was boring. And anytime you go home, or anytime you do something fun in school, and a kid goes home and says, well, we did this fun thing at school, and the parent, who's an expert because they've been in school before, well, that's not what I did. So obviously you're not learning, because it's not miserable. Okay? How do we fight against this dichotomy where school is boring and gaming is fun? Okay? Learning is fun. Who disagrees with that? So there's some. Okay? It depends on what you're learning, really, right? Memorizing organic chemistry, the carbon molecules, right? But we're built to learn things. We're built to know things. That's what we want. We're curious by nature. And whether we're just learning whatever the curriculum says, or learning on our own, or learning how to use a guitar to play Dark Souls, right? That's the gap. That's the essence. Bridging that gap. Bridging boring school with what should be fun school, what should be engaging school. It's this fundamental dichotomy, and it requires thinking about learning in a sort of different way, right? We typically think, or not we necessarily, but learning is typically thought about in an institutional sense as you will listen to the teacher, you will write down what the teacher says, you will memorize that, and then when the test at the end of the unit comes, you will simply repeat that, or some permutation of that, okay? That's rote, that's memorization. It has a place. Don't misunderstand me. That has a place, like memorizing carbon molecules. If you don't know the facts, you can't use them, okay? But there's another way to think about learning, okay? How many of you have read The Medici Effect or heard of it before? No? Okay, it's a great book. It's a really, really great book. Published in 2006. It's all about intersections, okay? What we typically, the word that's associated that we typically hear is called interdisciplinary, right? You have people from multiple fields coming together to work toward a common good. Okay? Intersections are where different fields cross, different specializations cross. It's a way to integrate knowledge from field A with knowledge from field B to come up with something innovative, an unusual but fruitful combination. Okay? One recent example of this is back 7-8 years ago, a study was published in Nature magazine about how neuroscientists and biologists and computer scientists and mathematicians all came together to develop a way for a monkey to control a pixel moving across a screen. Just look with a headset, okay? That's an intersection. It gave rise to a whole new field of study, okay? The best example of intersections ever was the Renaissance, right? Where you had a rediscovery of ancient learning. You had all of these flourishing fields because they were brand new. It was a time of invention. You had polymaths, people who mastered many different things and invented in many different fields. With the Enlightenment, that furthered, but after that, it started to fragment. You had people specializing and drilling in, okay? We're at the point now where we've taken the world apart enough and we have to put it together, okay? And that is the thesis of the Medici effect, okay? We've gotten to that point where we need to start putting things back together. We need to start making intersections. Okay? Now, that gap that I was talking about before, educators and developers, it's fruitful for an intersection. Who here likes chocolate-covered broccoli? Have you ever tried it? No? You probably should, just to realize how awful it is. Okay. Games for memorizing facts or solving rote problems. That is what that is. It is chocolate-covered broccoli. Okay? Anytime a really boring, terrible thing is dressed up and made flashy somehow, that is what it is. It's chocolate-covered broccoli. Okay? Learning is facts plus thinking about those facts, thinking about those systems. Okay? When you have games that are just facts, that's what it is. So I did a quick search, and my focus is educational games. And so I thought it worthwhile to look at a couple of things that just a Google search about learning games brings up. So just from the titles, you have Do Most Educational Games Suck? And 6 educational games that actually weren't that bad. Okay? And I want to examine that for a second, because it's disturbing to me that you would destroy the concept of a game and destroy the concept of learning or education by creating something that's really, really awful. So we're going to scroll down. He's got a couple of wonderful images here. Okay, so you have FunBrain Math Baseball. What is the gameplay there? Can you all see that? What's the gameplay? Yeah. For those of you who have trouble seeing, that is 19 times 62, and instead of answer, it's swing. Okay? That is high quality learning game. I'm not actually sure what's going on in this one. It looks like you just drag and drop things. How about Quiz Hub? Click on an event, then click on the corresponding year. Okay? I think the insulting thing about this is that it says play again. I don't even know what's going on here. This mouse is trying to get cheese left over in a bathroom. But you have to measure. You have to measure your way across. Hot Math Number Cop. I can't even. So, the point, right? This is what learning games are typically thought of as. You have the game, which is the sort of fun window dressing that makes the terrible thing within look better. Okay, that's the chocolate. But then you have the learning, which is the broccoli, because that's how it's presented. That's how it's presented. That is how bettering your mind is presented. It sucks so bad, we've got to give it this gamey mask, okay? The other link, the games that aren't actually that bad, Oregon Trail. Pepper's Adventures in Time. Super Solver's Midnight Rescue. I remember playing that. I don't remember what it was about or what I was supposed to be learning. Math Blaster. The Incredible Machine. Typing of the Dead. You have to type these things before zombies eat you. It's a little like that jogging app. You turn it on, it's GPS based, and it has music, and you're like, it's like a Walking Dead. You're a runner trying to gather supplies, and it charts a course for you to follow, and it tells you when zombies are chasing you, so you have to sprint them instead of just jog. It actually works pretty well. It's fun. But the game that a lot of people are really aware of is Math Blaster. And remember what we talked about with chocolate-covered broccoli? What is the game there? What's the game? It's 10 times 5. That's the game. That's the game. 10 times 5. Now, Filament's approach, and I'm not trying to plug our products, Let's get that out of the way. I'm not trying to plug our products. I'm trying to show that there's a different way to approach games for learning. Okay? And our approach is that systems are fun. Systems of knowledge, not just the rote facts, but the systems that those facts come together in, that wiggle and move around and react to you poking at them. Okay? That's where students can explore. That's where students can play. And that's where the play is the learning. Okay? Reach for the Sun is a game that is in the arcade. And actually, I noticed that people were playing it before on the classic mode, which is real time. Okay? The flower takes on nutrients through the roots. It takes water in through the roots. The leaves go through photosynthesis. You touch all of these things in order to collect all these different resources. And you guide the development of the plant with the goal at the end of the season is to have as many seeds as you possibly can. So it goes through this process of pollination and you sprout flowers. And the strategy of the game actually corresponds to how plants grow over time. Okay? We released the game on Steam, for those of you who are familiar with that. And in kind of an overwhelming response of players was they wanted a strategic mode where it was turn-based. And actually, it was interesting to us because that's a great tool. If you can pause in between each stage of development, what do you think you can do with the game in a classroom setting? You can discuss it. You can discuss what's going on. You can do that formative assessment. Figure out, okay, are students grasping what the plant is doing right now? Another game that's in the arcade is Motion Force. This is a game about Newton's laws of motion, set in space, and it's kind of a maze/logic puzzle. Over time, you have to apply Newtons of force to move your ship around. Your whole goal is to rescue these things called fuzzies. Okay? The gameplay is application of force in an object in a perfectly elastic environment, right? In space. Okay? It's time-based, it's a logic puzzle, but it makes use of that concept. And so students who are completely new to any of this are able to figure out, okay, if I apply 4 newtons of force going this way, if I want it to stop, I have to apply equal and opposite. Otherwise, it's going to bang into the wall. Okay? It's very simple, it's very focused, but the gameplay is what is being learned. It's not window dressing for a worksheet. And here's another one, is Backyard Engineer. Okay? In this game, you are developing catapults to launch at the neighbor kids. You don't want to hit the dog, and so this is actually kind of a difficult level because you'll notice there's a blast radius, okay? And you've got people on trikes who are weaving through all those dogs. And so the student, by playing this, has to learn to understand trade-offs. They have to understand different ways to engineer and problem solve. And so it's not directly any specific engineering, like, oh, I need a catapult arm length of such and such meters or whatever to do this, but rather simply understanding that if I want to accomplish this task, these are the trade-offs. This is what I have to adjust. These are the variables at work here. Okay? The gameplay is what is being learned. So at the Learning Games Summit, this gentleman here, he's a lead designer at Ubisoft. Okay? He worked on Rocksmith. Who knows what Rocksmith is? Okay, a couple of you. It's awesome because it teaches you how to play a guitar. Not like Rock Band, not like Guitar Hero where you're using a contrived controller. You actually use a guitar. Okay? It teaches you to play the guitar. And we're going to talk about how Rocksmith, which is commercial AAA development, is a learning game. Okay?
great design is often driven by solving a problem. And when we started working on Rocksmith, we realized we had a fundamental problem where if you ask somebody to play and they play on easy, they'll just be playing one note. And that's fine at first. Then after 2 minutes into the song, they've been getting it right for 2 minutes and they get very bored. They want more of a challenge. Conversely, if they start playing on hard because they think they're good and then it's too difficult, then it's frustrating. Those experiences didn't seem to fit with what we're trying to achieve. So you start off and the game will be set at its lowest difficulty level. But then the moment that it sees that you're doing well, it will start to level up. And the higher the level you're playing at, the more points you're going to score. And that's really what we refer to as the Rocksmith method. And that's the method of adapting to you as you play, analyzing your skill, suggesting practice options, changing the density of the notes, the complexity of each song, the contents of the articulations, what it's asking you to do, just like a great guitar teacher would. So the game starts off, and then you'll be invited to your first event, which will be at the Powerhouse, which is a small venue. We actually go from small venues all the way through up to great big arenas. To get to play an event, you actually need to rehearse, which means you need to beat a score target so that you're able to go and perform the song. Because you don't want to just go on stage and not be very good at it. So as you rehearse, Rocksmith is actually tracking everything you're doing. If you're failing to meet a score, it's going to suggest ways to practice and ways to improve your score so that you will be able to qualify. So the better you're doing, the harder it's going to get, as it drives you to master songs and really become a guitarist. Then, once you've mastered every section, so you've maxed it out, you become eligible for Master Mode, which removes the interface entirely, which means it's just you, your guitar, the music, and the crowd in front of you. So when you're invited to an event, you have your suggested set list, which if you don't like it, you can just jump in and change it and put any song you like. Choosing the music for Rocksmith was actually a very complicated process. Each song was chosen not just because it was a big hit, it was really thinking about how does a player actually play the guitar? What's going to be a good progression? How can we put these songs together and see them going from just playing single notes and still having a satisfying experience, and from Rolling Stones right the way through to Best Coast and Titus Andronicus. We really concentrated on alternative rock because they had the strongest density of E standard and drop D tuning songs. That being our core, through downloadable content we're going to expand and cover other tunings and other genres as we move forward. You might be starting off at something very simple with just one note, but by the time you reach the highest levels, you'll be playing exactly what you heard on the record.
When he was talking at the beginning about how the game, how the game responds to how players are doing, and it adjusts accordingly, and it makes sure that it's at a difficulty that's not too easy. Right? If a player is playing single notes at a time and they're getting bored, and it adjusts the difficulty up or down based on how well they're doing. What is that? What do we in the education space call that?
Assessment and adaptation.
You assess, you adapt. Lev Vygotsky? Is that a familiar name?
Yeah, the prox.
Yeah, zone of proximal development. Good job. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That developer, or that designer, I should say, he didn't even know that that was a term before. He went up on stage after one of the U.S. Department of Ed officials was talking about how games do that well. He goes, I didn't even know that was a thing until just now, but we do it. It's called dynamic difficulty, okay? Phrase by phrase, it evaluates how well you did, and it adjusts up or it adjusts down, and it figures out, okay, this is what you're not doing well at. Here's a course of practice for you. Okay? The game is based, like the whole gameplay is based on the zone of proximal development. Okay? That is exactly what the game does as a dynamic system. Okay? And that's what we as educators, that defines how we interact with each and every student. Each and every student needs to be scaffolded differently to understand and work with the material that we are required to help them learn. So in ed tech, Last year, $1.5 billion were invested. Okay? $1.5 billion. And that's VC. That's venture capital. That's not counting the money that the U.S. government is putting into it. $1.5 billion. It's $1.5 billion going to developers who have yet to solve the problem. What do we developers have in common with you educators? Okay? Where I struggle now, this is kind of the struggle that I, in my position and as a former educator and somebody who advocates for you guys in anything that we do, is how many developers will go up on stage at these events, or how many innovative teachers, teachers at kind of the bleeding edge, they're the ones who have adopted whatever technology 10 years before the rest of us catch up, okay? Just because they can, that's their interest, that's fine, that's wonderful. But when people get up on stage and say, we've already solved this problem, we know why games or insert ed tech here are good. Now we've got to drag everybody else kicking and screaming into the next century because they can't give worksheets anymore. Remember at the beginning when I asked you, who wants to give worksheets? I suspect that's none of you. Okay? But it's an opinion from on high. And I'm going to start kind of waxing philosophically here for a second. Because you as classroom teachers, you face constraints. These are just some of the broadest level constraints that you as people who will be teaching students in real classrooms are going to face. Okay? You've got technology. Some schools have one-to-one iPads. That's wonderful. Beth told me a little bit earlier about how some people think of them as $600 after the rest of the homework problems are solved. Right? They're not integrated. They're not used. Most of the time, schools take that technology, they say, oh, this is imperative, we have to do it, and then what's done with it? You scan the worksheets. You scan the textbook. You make Google quizzes. Okay? Because people aren't shown what can be possible with this stuff. Or you don't have the time to implement any of these things. Okay? Other schools have one computer lab with machines from the early 2000s. How the hell are you supposed to use that when it takes, 15, 20 minutes to even get logged in? Which brings us to the next constraint, time. 90 minutes? 50 minutes? 45 minutes? If we aren't working with educators, if educators aren't involved in the design and development process, there's no way that we can design a tool that will work given any of these constraints. Okay? The next, and actually I should have put this at the top of the list because for me this is the most important one. Accessibility. Students aren't the same. No student is the same. Nobody has the same abilities. Everybody is an individual. Okay? Now, we design our games with the UDL framework in mind. We try to make sure it's as accessible as possible given everything else. Sometimes we fail. Okay? But we don't ship a game unless it has voiceover. That is one commitment that we have, right? Because not every student is able to read all the things. Okay? But for developers who don't work with educators, who don't have a clue all of the difficulties that you face every day, that's not much of a concern in a lot of cases. Okay? And at the bottom of the list, standards. Okay? At the end of the day, when you're being assessed, when you're being held accountable for whatever you're teaching, you have all of these standards to meet, and they change every 3 years for the love of God, okay? Our games are NGSS aligned. We also find common core. We also try to say, okay, if we're going down to Texas with our games, they've got their own set of standards. Minnesota has their own set of standards. Everybody has their own set of standards. Every municipality has their own set. It's the case, okay? Standards. Developers can look at standards and they can give token correspondence to standards, but unless a teacher goes in and says, look, this is how I teach this standard currently, this is where my practice falls short, this is what I need a tool for, a developer is going to say, this is wonderful, and nobody is ever going to use it because it isn't wonderful. It doesn't work for you, the end user. And then there's the audience of anything ed tech. Okay? So we're at a weird confluence of audiences. We have teachers, the people who are actually using our product and need it to meet all sorts of needs. You have the administrators who hold the purse strings, right? And what's important to administrators? Not to throw them under the bus, but for them, it comes down to, look, our school needs to perform well on these high-stakes standardized tests. And if the tool doesn't meet that purpose, sorry. And then you've got the parents who went to school once and they know all things education, who say, you had fun today? That's bullshit. Sorry. Okay? Not every parent is like that. But there are a lot who, when a child goes home and says, we played a game in science class today, they're like, what? Why are you using class time that way? And let's not forget the students themselves, the student who has to play the thing or use the thing that they've been given. So all those learning games that suck that we looked at before, kids will see through that immediately, okay? The window dressing fools nobody except for the teacher who has never, ever, ever used anything like that before and has no way of evaluating one learning game against another, okay? Part of my job is to make sure that teachers are educated and can evaluate good things versus bad things. Okay? And right now, what's the number? It's like anybody born after 1965 has probably played games in their lives. More and more teachers are entering who are past that. I would hope so. So it's not as much of a concern. That old paradigm of learning games is fading. But you have developers who are in this field getting $1.5 billion of funding who are saying, look, we need to make the magic game that will convince everybody that everything that they're doing is wrong and they'll all come on board. This is actually talked about at this conference that I was at. People are hoping for the magic bullet to convince you that what you're doing, you need to use this game. Does it work that way? I'm opening this to you. I want to know, how do you think that works? Are you waiting for just the one to convince you? That's my opinion on it, is there's no such thing as the one that solves all of the problems. It's a unified effort, people making good products aligned with actual authentic educator needs. And so our model at Filament is early and often. We talk to teachers early, we talk to them often, we bring them into the office, we work with them directly at every stage in the process. And I'm not going to go too deeply into that, except to say that for us, the teachers at the center, we have them at the center of our model. Without them, we don't make anything good. That's our perspective, okay? And I'm talking about all of this because who controls the future? The article, I'm not going to go to it, but the article at the bottom is a Fast Company article about what schooling is going to look like in 2020. Who do you think they interviewed? The teachers?
High school students.
Would it be shocking to you to know that they interviewed not teachers, not high school students, not anybody actually in schools, but rather 4 innovative education companies? $1.5 billion. Okay. Along with what a lot of people have termed the systematic gutting of public education. Okay. Who controls the future of education? At the summit on Tuesday, the question was asked, what does education look like in 2025? 10 years from now, what does education look like? And the vision was actually really, really cool. It's something that I found myself totally on board with. Games are a transitional technology. iPads are transitional. We'll eventually be moving toward a very, very personal model in which every student has some sort of an artificial intelligent mentor that they're able to interact with in a virtual reality space. Developers will design situations in which you can put on this headset, you can put on the tactile gear, and you can be part of a team that's building a bridge. You can be an engineer in that virtual space, and you are assigned like a computer as a mentor that's able to dynamically interact with you and scaffold everything for you. Okay? That's wonderful. That sounds awesome. I am 100% on board with that. But right now, what's the percentage of schools that can actually afford broadband? 100% of the time. It's actually really depressing. It's not all of them, I'll tell you that much. It's a great vision. It's a great thing to strive for. But right now, that is a vision that, guys, as teachers, that isn't informed by you. That's informed by the people who are getting the venture capital. And I can guarantee you that that sort of technology isn't going to be available in most schools. Maybe some of the upper tier ones, maybe the ones that can afford lots of things anyway, but they're not the ones that need help, right? So there's this nifty little book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and I don't actually know this for sure, but this is the first guy who was like, paradigm shift. Okay, I hate that term, it's businessy and awesome, actually. But this is the book about how scientific revolutions happen. Broadly, revolutions at all, any sort of an intellectual revolution. Almost always the people who achieve fundamental inventions of a new paradigm have been either very young or very new to the field whose paradigm they change. Okay? Right now, as you are preparing to enter this field politically, it's awful, right? I didn't go in because I didn't want to deal with that, but I want to support as much as possible. That's why I'm where I am. Those of you who are brave enough to go onto the front lines, you are new to the field, and you're going to be defining practice going forward. You can't let the publishers tell you how to do, what to do, when. Okay, they're vested in the current paradigm, where every kid has the same textbook. And it's getting better. As technology is available, it's much easier to individualize learning, create custom curricula for kids. If you have a program like Rock Band that automatically adjusts, or a Rocksmith, that's awesome, but most people don't. You guys have to change the paradigm, okay? Right now it's all standards. It's all top-down. It's all do as we say. I think teaching is a profession that doesn't give itself to that very well. At least I'll cry when that happens. Okay? Individual thought has a strong central place in this, and it's got to stay that way. Okay? So where I am, and what I do, is to make sure that it's not us that control the future of schooling. We create tools for you who do the actual thing of education. We create tools. Another tool on the belt. That's all games are. And that's the healthy perspective. Contra those who see schools as unnecessary. Okay. So 4 questions. We'll go back to the first one. What do educators and developers have to do with each other? Well, you saw that video. The guy didn't even know about zones of proximal development, but he was using them. Okay? He was using them. Designers, whether of games or education, they have the same job, to scaffold a player or a student from point A to point B in a way that works for them, in a way that is player-centric. So I think that designers and developers have a lot in common. It's just, you don't have to stand on opposite sides of the dance hall. Okay, that's our perspective. Going forward, you need to control how education proceeds. And you need to take an active role in defining what is acceptable and what isn't. There are going to be a lot of people who tell you, do this. And you've got to say, no, not without my consent. Okay? So I went a little bit over. But I would love to open the floor to discussion, if you guys have time even. Okay. Thank you.